In other news now, representatives of the LGBTQI community are calling for urgent government action. That's in response to the surge in killings of members of the communities. There have been almost weekly reports on social media highlighting the brutal killings of people because of their sexual orientation. My colleague, that's eNCA reporter Heidi Jokos, is following that story for us. Heidi, good afternoon. Just reading that introduction just makes me wonder, what have we become? Now, representatives of the LGBTQI+ community holding a news conference today. What are they asking for government to do?
Yes, certainly, Braden, and just hearing the activists today speaking about the state of the bodies found over the past couple of days is truly horrifying. And this is why there was a press conference held today for attention to be brought with regards to the LGBTIQ+ community and how they need to be respected and treated equally within communities. The activists are demanding that the president address the matter as urgently as possible. They have given him a deadline for Friday to condemn the brutal killings that we have seen over the past couple of weeks, but also for funds to be made available to the various organizations and committees to deal with the matter urgently. What the activists are also calling for, Bradan, is for there to be proper education within communities, within families and within cultures to say that those who decide on their sexual orientation should be accepted no matter what it is, and they should not be brutally murdered. Of course, they are expressing the fact that the community is extremely anxious given what has happened over the past couple of weeks. But let's listen to one activist with regards to some of those demands.
We demand that by the end of this week, the President of South Africa unequivocally speak out, condemns and calls for an end to the violent attacks on the LGBTIQ+ community. Furthermore, the government of South Africa to urgently finalize and enact the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crime and Hate Speech Bill, which was first drafted in 2016 and was approved by Cabinet in 2018. Properly fund resources and restore the functionality of failing entities such as the National Task Team and the response teams, as well as the provincial task teams that were meant to address violence against LGBTIQ+ South Africans. To also create dedicated LGBTIQ+ desks in each province to address the needs of the LGBTIQ+ citizens. To ensure that sensitized and safe shelters are provided or are funded for LGBTIQ+ people who are in crisis in provinces.
And what's the role, Heidi, of the religious community in the fight for the human rights of this community?
Yes, certainly, Braden. We're hearing the activists highlight the fact that religious leaders need to also come to the party and play a crucial role in educating and not speaking ill of those that decide differently on their sexual orientation. We do know that the activists today in their press conference highlighting the fact that certain religious leaders or those that are on the podium in churches speaking ill of this specific community and saying that they have certain cures for those who decide differently on their sexual orientation. The activists saying that religious leaders need to play a different role and rather educate and inform and not rather add fuel to the fire with regards to these brutal killings and communities not accepting this community. But let's listen to the activists once again speaking on this matter.
And religious leaders who stand on the pulpit and they preach God is love, but on the other hand, they preach hate towards LGBTI people and equate us and our lives as even worse than animals. That is unspeakable. We cannot have leaders like that. We cannot have people who are listened to by thousands of people perpetuating hate and instilling these teachings and thinking to people who are actually looking up to them, right? And more than that, we have parents who sit in these churches who go back home and find out that their children are queer and then they find themselves in a very difficult situation. They want to go to heaven, but then they love their children, and that's why we see a situation where.
And Heidi, how have the police been dealing with this? What has been their response?
So according to the activists from this media briefing, we understand that the community is not satisfied with the police's response. They are saying that police push these cases to the side, they don't deal with it adequately, and they rather say that there's no such thing as brutal killings of this community specifically. But before we listen to what one activist said with regards to the police's response, let's just speak about how the ANC Youth League's the ANC Youth League was also there today, and they've highlighted the fact that they are going to be speaking to the president next week, midweek, with regards to the brutal killings that the country has experienced over the past couple of weeks, and hopefully they will have a response and an action plan from the president. Also, there's been a cry from the Gauteng province specifically. We understand that the activist indicating today that the Premier David Makhura had promised for a specific committee to deal with this community and the ill treatment that they've experienced over the past couple of years. They're saying action was promised 7 years ago, and still to date nothing has happened. So many parties and government has been called to deal with this, especially the police when such cases are reported. Let's listen to another activist on this.
What we picked up is that people who they have, or services and SAPS has been difficult. We struggle with them, and how many times must we do these sensitization trainings? How many times must we provide these solutions and present them to government? To private sector. We're not holding people accountable, and we're enough. We're enough because there's so many other cases of murder that just go unnoticed, never reported, and people just don't even care. We're doing this now, but there's so many other families out there who still haven't healed, who are still going through the trauma of their children or their loved ones that were murdered many years ago. We've been talking about this. It's not new.
That's Tammy there from the Tammy Dish Foundation, ending that report on the Midday View by Heidi Jokos.